My cabin destroyed the HOA president who tried to steal it. Audrey Blackwell's perfect makeup streamed down her face as hidden speakers, lights, and sprinklers activated in perfect sequence, transforming her elegant fundraiser into chaos. She had seized my private lake property for her event using a bylaw she'd secretly modified, never suspecting that every inch of my home was rigged with technological traps. "I'll be taking your cabin for my party," she'd announced, arching in without permission. If only she'd known what awaited her and her elite guests. "Where are you watching from?" Drop a comment while I reveal how an AI security engineer turned his grandfather's old cabin into an automated revenge system that taught a powerful HOA tyrant the ultimate lesson about trespassing on the wrong property. My cabin sits on the eastern shore of Pinehurst Lake, Michigan, a rustic two-story structure my grandfather built in the 1960s. After a soul-crushing divorce 8 months ago, I purchased this place as a sanctuary and healing project. Oliver Grant, security engineer, by day cabin renovator by night, the morning Audrey arrived. I was enjoying a peaceful coffee on my deck, watching the mist rise off the water. The serenity shattered when a glossy white Range Rover pulled up my gravel driveway. Audrey Blackwell didn't knock, she simply entered designer heels, clicking on my hardwood floors like she owned the place. "Beautiful morning, isn't it, Oliver?" she said, helping herself to a seat at my kitchen island. Her perfectly highlighted hair caught the sunlight as she scanned my cabin, eyes calculating like she was taking inventory. "I've been meaning to stop by and properly welcome you to our community, though. You've been here, 8 months now?" I offered a tight smile. 7 months and 23 days. But who's counting the unspoken part? 7 months and 23 days of peace. Until now, Audrey got to business quickly. "I'm hosting a fundraiser for my mayoral campaign, and your cabin would be perfect rustic charm. With those modern touches, you've added exactly what I need to impress some important investors next Saturday." She wasn't asking, she was informing. "I appreciate the thought, Audrey, but I'm afraid my cabin isn't available for events," I replied. Keeping my tone, even her smile didn't falter, but something flickered in her eyes. Confusion. Audrey Blackwell wasn't accustomed to hearing no. "All of her," she said slowly, as if explaining to a child. "Have you read your HOA guidelines thoroughly? Section 12.3, temporary property use for community benefit. My fundraiser qualifies as community benefit." I choked on my coffee. "You can't be serious. This is my private property. As HOA president, I determine what constitutes community benefit," she said, standing to walk around my living room, snapping photos with her phone. "We updated the bylaws 6 months ago. Every member received notification." She paused at my grandfather's old engineering desk. "I need the space next Saturday. My team will handle everything." When I insisted she leave, I caught her taking measurements of my deck after she left. I immediately called Olivia Reed, owner of the Lakeside Coffee Shop. Olivia's face darkened when I mentioned Audrey's visit. "She's not just running for mayor," Olivia confided, leaning across the counter. "She's partnering with Robert Westfield, billionaire developer, and your cabin sits dead center in the land." They are eyeing. Olivia's family had owned a cafe on the lakeshore, where my cabin now stood before Audrey. Manufactured code violations that forced them to sell at a fraction of its value. "She'll use any means necessary," Olivia warned. Legal, barely legal, or completely underhanded. That evening, an official HOA letter arrived citing the exact bylaw Audrey had mentioned. The fine print highlighted a clause passed in a special session that granted the HOA president final discretion regarding definition of community benefit. I sat at my grandfather's desk reading the highlighted section. Temporary use not to exceed 48 hours may be designated by board majority vote. At the bottom, Audrey's signature beside the handwritten note. "Looking forward to the fundraiser. Please vacate by noon on Saturday." So Audrey had amended HOA bylaws to legally commandeer private property, but she chosen the wrong cabin and the wrong engineer. My grandfather didn't just build this place for fishing. As a military communications specialist, he designed it with hidden compartments and unique wiring, and I hadn't just renovated it, I'd made it the testing ground for my military-grade smart home AI system. If Audrey wanted war, I would give her war, one she wouldn't see coming until it was too late. I spent that night digging through old boxes in the basement, searching for my grandfather's original cabin blueprints. Behind a dusty shelf, I found a metal lockbox I'd never noticed before. Inside were detailed schematics showing hidden conduits, unusual wiring configurations, and notes about communication contingencies my grandfather had built this place during the height of Cold War paranoia, incorporating features no ordinary cabin would have. One notation particularly caught my eye. Primary override panel east wall. Behind wood panel, following the diagram, I found a concealed access point behind what looked like an ordinary piece of pine paneling. Inside was a rudimentary control system from the 1970s, primitive by today's standards but brilliantly designed. This would be the perfect backbone for integrating my AI security protocols. It was as if my grandfather had built this place, anticipating it would need to defend itself someday. I smiled, feeling his presence in the craftsmanship around me. "Thanks, Grandpa," I whispered to the empty room. "I think we're about to need every trick you built into this place." The next morning, I visited Howard Jenkins, a 72-year-old former judge who'd lived on Pinehurst Lake for over 40 years. His waterfront cottage stood in stark contrast to the newer McMansions populating the shoreline. Howard had witnessed Pinehurst's transformation from quiet retreat to exclusive community under Audrey's iron-fisted HOA leadership. She's been amending bylaws for 3 years. Howard explained, shuffling through HOA documents spread across his dining table. A line here, a clause. They're nothing dramatic enough to cause protest, but together he tapped a stack of papers near absolute power. She's removed 7 homeowners who opposed her, all perfectly legal, but morally bankrupt. Howard pointed to a document. "Look here, the community benefit clause was buried in a 30-page seasonal decoration update. Nobody reads those, but it gives her the right to commandeer any property for approved community events with minimal notice." I drove home planning my defense strategy only to find something unsettling. My coffee mug wasn't where I had left it. Nothing else seemed disturbed, but someone had definitely been inside. I pulled up my security camera footage, and there he was, Garrett Powell, Audrey's HOA compliance manager, entering my cabin using a key. He wandered through each room taking photos and measurements. "She was your realtor when you bought the place, right?" Howard said when I called him. "Keeping copies of keys is illegal, but hard to prove. Change your locks immediately." That night I began activating Project Guardian, the military smart home AI system I'd been developing. While most smart homes offered convenience, mine provided security that bordered on paranoia. I installed new biometric locks, motion sensors in every room, and programmed my AI Pine Protective Intelligence Network entity to recognize authorized versus unauthorized visitors through facial recognition. For unauthorized visitors, I designed non-harmful but highly irritating traps. Speakers programmed to emit high-pitched tones. Only certain people could hear. Smart thermostats that would gradually increase temperature, and plumbing that could switch from warm to freezing in seconds. I set up my desk in the living room, surrounded by monitors showing every corner of my property. If Audrey wanted my cabin, she'd have to fight my technology for it. The next afternoon, Garrett returned for another inspection the moment his face registered on my camera. Pine activated Protocol 1 as he entered. Using the copied key, lights began flickering, and a subtle, disorienting hum filled the air. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Doorknobs gave mild static shocks. Garrett looked increasingly unsettled, checking his phone as if suspecting electrical problems when he attempted to photograph my office sprinklers. Activated for 3 seconds, just 3 enough to soak him. Cursing, he fled, dropping a folder in his hasty retreat. Inside were preliminary drawings for Pinehurst Resort and Spa. With my cabin marked as the central lodge, attached was a construction timeline with Phase 1 Remove Grant Cabin, scheduled immediately after Audrey's fundraiser. While examining the plans at my deck, I noticed a woman in waders collecting water samples at the lake's edge. She introduced herself as Mia Forrester, a 33-year-old biologist studying Pinehurst's ecosystem. "Those resort plans would destroy the lake," she said after I showed her the drawings. "The runoff alone would kill the native fish population." Mia had been fighting Audrey for years over environmental protections. "Westfield isn't just a developer," she added. "He's notorious for circumventing environmental regulations. Last year, he tanked my conservation project by bribing county officials." Mia agreed to monitor activity around my cabin when I was at work. Audrey's not just after your cabin, she warned. This whole section of the lake is marked for redevelopment. Your cabin's just the beginning. That evening, I opened the folder again, studying the three-dimensional resort model. With the handwritten note, Phase 1, remove Grant Cabin. A week ago, I was just worried about protecting my property rights. Now I was fighting for my cabin's very existence. Well, Audrey, you've declared war on exactly the wrong engineer. I spent the night upgrading every system, preparing for whatever came next. My grandfather built this cabin to withstand Cold War paranoia. Under my modifications, it would become a fortress, one with eyes, ears, and a very bad attitude toward unwelcome guests. I realized I needed to understand exactly how Audrey operated so I could anticipate her next moves. The resort plans gave me an angle, but I needed more. After Mia left, I drove to the county records office and requested all permit applications, variance requests, and zoning changes Audrey had been involved with over the past 5 years. The clerk raised an eyebrow at my extensive request, but provided the files after I paid a hefty copying fee. What I found shocked me. Audrey had systematically acquired or forced the sale of 7 properties around the lake, each following the same pattern. First came minor HOA violations, then escalating fines, then some form of community use claim, and finally an undervalued purchase through a shell company that later transferred ownership to Westfield's development group. My cabin wasn't a random target. It was the next domino in a carefully orchestrated land grab that had been going on for years. I also discovered environmental impact reviews that had mysteriously disappeared from public records, only to reappear later with drastically different conclusions. Mia's conservation project hadn't just been undermined. Its scientific findings had been altered with her name still attached to give legitimacy to the fraudulent documents. This wasn't just about real estate. It was about systematically corrupting public processes for private gain. When I returned home, I found Garrett's business card tucked into my doorframe with a handwritten note, "Fix your plumbing. You have 48 hours to address water damage to adjoining property or face HOA sanctions." There was no water damage, no adjoining property, just another fabricated violation to build a paper trail against me. Their tactics were becoming increasingly transparent, but that didn't make them any less dangerous. I was facing an opponent who controlled not just the HOA, but apparently had influence over local government functions as well. I made 3 more upgrades to my cabin that night, focusing on documentation systems that would capture every conversation, every entrance, and every action within my property. If Audrey wanted to play with false paper trails, I would create an indisputable digital one that would expose her entire operation record. Everything became my new mantra as I worked through the night, fueled by equal parts caffeine and indignation over the next 3 days. I transformed my cabin into a technological marvel that would make my military contractor clients envious. Pine became my co-conspirator, learning to distinguish between friend and foe through facial and gait recognition. Every light bulb, faucet, thermostat, and speaker became a potential trap. All controllable through my secure smartphone app, the system's sophistication went far beyond commercial smart homes. Pine could make real-time decisions based on who entered which room, their behavior patterns, and even their emotional state detected through micro-expressions. The cabin itself became an extension of my defense, not just a passive structure, but an active participant in protecting itself. I programmed customized responses to specific individuals for Audrey's subtle temperature, increases that would make makeup run for Garrett, random static electricity at door knobs and metal surfaces. Nothing dangerous, but everything irritating. Even the floor became weaponized. Certain boards would trigger opera music at ears, splitting volumes. When Garrett's specific footstep pattern was detected, my first mini-trap test came when a curious neighbor approached my deck. The smart sprinklers activated with surgical precision, soaking only his shoe system. Malfunction. I apologized, hiding my smile as Pine logged the successful test. Meanwhile, Audrey escalated her campaign. She called an emergency HOA meeting at the community center, where she publicly labeled me a community threat. I attended, sitting silently in the back row as she addressed the 50 homeowners present. "Mr. Grant has refused to cooperate with standard HOA protocols," she announced, her voice dripping with concern. He's violating numerous regulations and turning his cabin into a digital fortress that threatens our community's privacy and security. When I attempted to defend myself, she expertly cut me off, citing meeting procedure rules the community had been thoroughly manipulated. They saw me as the problem, not Audrey's power grab walking to my car afterward. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I have information about my wife. Meet me tonight. No one can know. WB attached was a photo taken from inside my cabin. My grandfather's desk with the resort plans visible. Someone had been inside again. Despite my new locks, I met with Mia and Olivia at a diner 30 miles from Pinterest, forming our first alliance against Audrey. Olivia's eyes burned with suppressed rage as she described losing her family's lakeside cafe. My father built that place in 1975. Audrey manufactured health code violations until we couldn't afford to fight anymore. She forced us to sell for pennies on the dollar. Maya revealed she'd found permit applications for construction in my area, submitted by a shell company linked to Westfield's firm. They're not waiting for approval. She warned they've already ordered preliminary surveys. When I returned home, Pine greeted me with an alert security violation, detected 3 unauthorized devices installed. A sweep revealed tiny microphones in my living room, bedroom, and kitchen. Audrey wasn't just planning to use my cabin, she was spying on me. I left the devices in place, but installed jammers that would feed them static, or better yet, pre-recorded conversations of my choosing. Pine's display flashed a new message: incoming vehicle detected through my window. I watched Wesley Blackwell, Audrey's husband, approach my door nervously. I activated audio scrambling before opening it. "We need to talk," he said, eyes darting around. But not here. She has ears everywhere. The realization hit me like a thunderbolt. I wasn't just defending my property anymore. I was being monitored in my own home. But 2 could play this game. Audrey, my cabin wasn't just a trap. It was becoming a weapon. And Wesley Blackwell, my enemy's husband, was about to become my most unexpected ally in a battle I never asked for, but was now determined to win. I decided to create a demonstration for Pine's capabilities, something that would confirm my system was ready for whatever Audrey planned next. Using my engineering background, I developed a simulation of various intrusion scenarios, ranging from simple trespassing to coordinated multi-person entries. Pine needed to respond appropriately to each situation without causing actual harm or property damage. The testing phase revealed both strengths and weaknesses. Pine excelled at identification and surveillance, but sometimes overreacted to innocent behaviors. I spent hours fine-tuning algorithms, teaching the system to distinguish between threatening and non-threatening actions. The AI needed to understand context, the difference between someone casually leaning against a wall and someone searching for hidden surveillance equipment. My military contracts had taught me that the best defense systems were those that remained invisible until needed. I carefully concealed every sensor, camera, and speaker, integrating them into existing fixtures and furniture. The vintage record player in the living room now contained advanced audio processing capabilities. The antique fishing lures displayed on wall shelves each housed miniature cameras. Even the traditional weather vane on the roof served as an environmental monitoring station and communications antenna. While I worked, Olivia kept me updated on community gossip. Audrey had begun spreading rumors that I was mentally unstable following my divorce and was turning my cabin into a surveillance bunker. Due to paranoid delusions, she'd even suggested to several neighbors that they should avoid walking near my property for their own safety. The character assassination was clearly meant to isolate me from potential allies and discredit anything I might reveal about her plans. Most disturbing was Olivia's report that Audrey had approached the local police chief at a fundraising dinner, expressing concerns about my behavior and suggesting I might need a wellness check. The implications were clear. She was laying groundwork to paint me as unstable. If I fought back against her plans, it was a sophisticated form of gaslighting, creating a narrative where my legitimate defense would be interpreted as evidence of mental instability. "He's done this before," Olivia explained during our late-night strategy session 3 years ago when Dr. Peterson refused to sell his lakefront property. Suddenly, there were concerns about his cognitive decline and his fitness to live alone. 6 months later, his daughter had moved him to assisted living, and his property was sold to one of Audrey's shell companies. This information changed my approach entirely. I needed not just physical and technological defenses, but also social and legal ones. I began documenting everything, creating time-stamped backups of all surveillance footage, recording all interactions with Audrey and her associates, and establishing a clear timeline of harassment. If she wanted to paint me as paranoid, I'd make sure I had irrefutable evidence justifying every precaution I'd taken in the midst of these preparations. Pine detected an unusual pattern of network activity. Someone was attempting to access my home's Wi-Fi network. The sophisticated attack suggested professional-level hacking skills far beyond what I'd expect from Audrey or Garrett. I traced the intrusion attempt to a private security firm in Chicago, the same one mentioned in documents from Wesley's briefcase as having been retained by Westfield Development. They weren't just planning to take my cabin, they were actively trying to breach my security systems before the fundraiser. This escalation confirmed what I'd suspected: Audrey's fundraiser was merely a pretext. The real goal was establishing control over my property through any means necessary. I messaged Mia. They're moving faster than we thought. Time to activate. Phase 2, my cabin wasn't just going to defend itself. It was going to collect evidence that would expose their entire operation. I met Wesley Blackwell at a roadside diner 40 meters from Pinehurst. Despite being married to Audrey for 15 years, he looked nothing like the power couple's photos displayed around town in person. Wesley appeared exhausted, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame, his eyes constantly checking the door. He ordered coffee but didn't touch it. Audrey doesn't just want to be mayor, he confessed, voice barely above a whisper. That's just a stepping stone to control regional planning and push through the Pinehurst resort deal with Westfield. He slid a flash drive across the table. $200 million project. Audrey gets 2% as a consulting fee. $4 million for delivering the necessary properties and permits. The flash drive contained emails, planning documents, and financial projections. Your cabin is the cornerstone. The perfect location for the main lodge, with that view of the sunrise over the lake. Wesley took a shaky breath. She's done this before. 3 times uses HOA regulations to force people out, then flips the properties to developers. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Wesley looked away, shame evident in his slumped shoulders. I used to believe in what we were building together, but she's crossed too many lines, threatened too many good people. He hesitated. The conservation project she killed last year. The researcher nearly took her own life afterward. That was my wake-up call when I returned home. I discovered the audio jammers had been disabled. Someone had entered my cabin again and upgraded the surveillance devices. I swept the entire place, finding 7 new microphones hidden in light fixtures behind paintings. Even inside my coffee maker, I activated PIN's counter-surveillance protocols, creating a secure space in my workshop to continue planning the next morning. An official legal notice arrived. The Pinehurst Homeowners Association will hold its community networking event at the Grant residence on Saturday from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. Pursuant to bylaw. 12.3 attached was an email sent to the entire community, claiming I had graciously agreed to host the. I called 3 different lawyers, but each gave the same response, fighting the HOA would require lengthy litigation. They're banking on you not having the time or resources to fight this? Before Saturday, explained one attorney, even with a strong case, courts won't intervene on such short notice for what they view as a minor property dispute. That evening, sitting alone in my dimly lit living room, I felt the crushing weight of defeat. If Audrey could simply take my cabin for a party, what would stop her from finding ways to take it permanently? I began dismantling some of the traps, wondering if the fight was even worth it. My divorce had drained my emotional reserves, and now this battle was consuming what little energy I had left while clearing out a drawer. I found a photograph of my grandfather and me on the deck. Fishing when I was 10, he'd built this cabin as a sanctuary after returning from service. A place where the chaos of the world couldn't reach him. This cabin isn't just wood and nails away, he told me. It's our history. Never let anyone take it away. I sat in the darkness, my despair gradually transforming into determination. This wasn't just about HOA bylaws or property rights anymore. This was about standing my ground when the world wanted to push me aside again. My ex-wife had taken our home in the divorce. I wouldn't let Audrey take my sanctuary too. With renewed purpose, I reactivated every trap, upgraded Pine with advanced voice recognition, and programmed it for party day. I wasn't just defending my cabin anymore. I was fighting for what remained of myself after life had taken almost everything else. Want to know who I am after being pushed to the edge in my divorce? Want to know what's left after everything gets taken away? Welcome to my cabin. Audrey, let my AI introduce itself. The flash drive Wesley had given me revealed far more than just the resort plans. It contained years of correspondence between Audrey Westfield and various officials, documenting a pattern of manipulation, selective enforcement, and what appeared to be outright bribery. Most disturbing were the references to resistant property owners who had been systematically targeted. My name appeared in several recent emails labeled as Phase 3. Acquisition requires special handling. I spent hours analyzing the documents, mapping connections, and building a comprehensive picture of their operation. Audrey wasn't just a corrupt HOA president. She was the public-facing component of a sophisticated land acquisition scheme that had been operating for nearly a decade. Westfield remained in the background, financing her activities and political ambitions, while she delivered prime properties at below-market prices. The most valuable document was a spreadsheet tracking acquisition costs versus projected returns for each property, including mine. They had calculated the maximum amount of pressure they could apply before the owner would likely file legal action. It was cold calculated exploitation, reducing people's homes to mathematical formulas of resistance and breaking points. My cabin was valued at just over $600,000 on the open market, but Westfield's internal documents listed its target acquisition price as $180,000. The amount they expected I would accept after months of HOA harassment fines and manipulated code violations. The projected return after incorporation into the resort was listed as $4 million. They weren't just planning to take my home, they were planning to profit obscenely from it. This revelation changed everything. I was no longer just defending my property. I was potentially stopping a criminal enterprise that had been victimizing the community for years. I sent encrypted copies of everything to Howard, Mia, and Olivia with instructions to release it to authorities. If anything happened to me or my cabin that night, Pine detected movement on my property. Two figures moving through the wooded area behind the cabin. The infrared cameras identified them as professional surveyors, quietly taking measurements and soil samples under cover of darkness. I recorded everything but didn't intervene. Let them think they were operating undetected. Every action they took without proper permits or authorization was another piece of evidence for the case I was building. I adjusted my strategy. Rather than simply defending against Saturday's invasion, I would use it as an opportunity to document their entire operation. The party wouldn't just be an inconvenience, it would be the trap that caught them all, revealing not just Audrey's abuse of HOA authority, but the entire corrupt network she represented. With that decision made, I finalized preparations for what would become not just a defense of my home, but a counterattack against years of exploitation. As dawn broke, I stepped onto my deck and watched the sunrise over the lake. The same view that had made my property so valuable to Westfield. The tranquility of the scene stood in stark contrast to the battle that was coming. But for the first time since Audrey had walked into my cabin, I felt a sense of calm purpose. They had picked this fight thinking I was just another isolated homeowner. They could bully into submission. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. Over the next 2 days, I assembled my team of unlikely allies. Howard provided legal expertise. Olivia offered her cafe as our meeting place. Mia monitored Audrey's team around the lake, and Wesley fed us insider information. Each had their own reason to oppose Audrey, and together we formed a resistance that gave me hope. For the first time in days, Wesley revealed the details of Audrey's plan. Robert Westfield and 8 major investors would attend Saturday's event. She's promised them a tour of the future site. He explained they think this is a done deal. Audrey's already talking about breaking ground next month. Mia's expression darkened at the mention of Westfield. That man destroyed my conservation project last year by bribing county officials. The evidence disappeared. My funding got pulled and suddenly protected. Wetlands became developable land. 3 decades of research gone. Olivia discovered Audrey had placed advertisements in the local newspaper. announcing a resort preview event at Pinnerest Lodge. My cabin invitations had been sent to 60 influential community members, presenting my home as if it were already HOA property. Meanwhile, I focused on upgrading my traps and Pine's capabilities beyond the basic annoyances. I installed a comprehensive recording system activated by motion. Throughout the cabin, every conversation would be captured, every deal documented. But my masterpiece was Pine's voice simulation function. Using recorded samples to create realistic speech patterns, the system could now construct convincing dialogue based on actual recorded statements, without fabricating anything that wasn't already said. Howard analyzed the HOA bylaws, finding a potential legal counterattack section. 12.3 allows temporary use, but requires reasonable accommodation for the owner. He noted they violated that by demanding you vacate completely. It's a small legal opening, but enough to challenge them afterward. While reviewing Westfield's background, I received an anonymous call from a block number. "You're making powerful enemies, Mr. Grant," said a male voice. "The mayor's office doesn't appreciate civilians interfering with economic development." The call ended abruptly, confirming Audrey's connections extended beyond the HOA. Howard tried speaking up for me at a neighborhood meeting and returned with troubling news. Audrey threatened to cut senior services if I continued spreading misinformation, he said, his hands trembling slightly. "She controls the community budget for many seniors here. Those services are essential." Watching Audrey systematically silence anyone who supported me only strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was a stand against corruption that had been unchecked for too long. On Friday night, Pine alerted me to a new email intercepted between Audrey and Westfield. The subject line read, "Pinnerest Development Plan Confirmed." I opened the attached file to find images of my cabin marked secured and construction schedules beginning the following week. A message from Audrey read, "Property secured as discussed, owner. Situation handled, preview event tomorrow will demonstrate full site control." The truth hit me like a thunderbolt. My cabin wasn't just a party venue. It was merchandise being sold right under my nose. But tomorrow, my $2 million military-grade AI system would turn their elegant fundraiser into a technological nightmare they'd never forget. As I finalized preparations, Pine's display showed Audrey's car approaching the lakefront road, likely for one last site inspection before tomorrow's event. "Let her look," I whispered to the empty room. "Let her think she's won, because tomorrow technology would become my justice, unexpected, undeniable, and perfectly tailored to expose every lie she'd built her empire upon." My grandfather taught me that sometimes the best defense isn't just standing your ground. It's making the ground itself fight back, and my cabin was about to demonstrate exactly what that meant. The final 24 hours before the party involved meticulous preparations. I created multiple backup systems to ensure Piney would operate, even if the main power was cut. 3 separate generating systems, including my grandfather's old military generator, were ready to activate if needed. Every trap, every recording device, every sensor was tested and verified. Nothing could be left to chance. Most importantly, I established secure communications with my allies. Amaya would monitor from her research boat on the lake, providing visual confirmation of arrivals. Olivia would observe from her cafe across the street, tracking anyone entering or leaving. Howard would stay home but remain on standby for legal support. Wesley would attend the party as expected, but wear a specialized watch I'd configured to send emergency signals if necessary. I also prepared what I called the nuclear option complete data package, containing all evidence of Audrey and Westfield's activities, scheduled to automatically upload to 3 separate secure servers and send notification emails to state authorities. If I didn't enter a special code every 6 hours, it was extreme. But I'd learned from Wesley that these people played hardball. If they somehow managed to compromise my systems, or me personally, the evidence would still reach the proper authorities. The most challenging aspect was ensuring that everything I planned remained legal. I consulted with an attorney friend from my military contracting days, describing my setup in detailed technical terms. As long as there's no physical harm, no false imprisonment, and you're recording on your own property in a one-party consent state, you're within your rights, he confirmed. Just don't edit or manipulate any recordings if you plan to use them legally later. As night fell, I conducted one final walkthrough of every room. Each trap was ingeniously disguised as normal household functionality, the thermostat that would gradually increase temperature for specific individuals. The bathroom mirrors programmed to fog with personalized messages when detecting Audrey's face. The floorboards that would trigger specific audio clips based on who stepped on them and what conversations were happening nearby. Most impressive was Pine's advanced contextual awareness. The AI could now distinguish casual comments from actionable statements, recognizing when conversations shifted from social pleasantries to business dealings. It would remain passive during normal party chatter, but activate enhanced recording when key phrases like acquisition development or property transfer were detected as a final touch. I programmed what I called ethical constraints into the system. Pine would not record private conversations of a personal nature, would not activate traps that might endanger elderly or disabled guests, and would maintain normal temperature and lighting for anyone identified as neutral, ordinary community members who were just attending a party not involved in Audrey's schemes. I packed a small overnight bag and prepared to leave, making it appear I was complying with Audrey's demand to vacate. In reality, I would be at Mia's cottage across the lake, monitoring everything remotely. As I stood on my deck for one last check, I noticed Audrey's car passing slowly along the road, her silhouette visible behind the wheel. Our eyes met briefly before she accelerated away. In that moment, I realized this had become more than a property dispute. It was a battle of wills between two people who refused to be pushed around, but only one of us was fighting for something larger than personal gain. I locked the door, activated the security protocols, and whispered to the cabin itself, "Show them what you can do." The lights dimmed briefly in response, as if the building itself understood the mission ahead. Tomorrow would determine not just the fate of my home, but potentially the future of the entire community. I was as ready as I would ever be. Saturday arrived with picture-perfect weather, sunny skies reflecting off Pinnerest Lake. Audrey had ordered it specifically for her event. I pretended to leave town, making a show of loading my car, while neighbors watched. In reality, I drove to Mia's cottage on the far side of the lake, where I had established a remote command center. From there, Pine gave me eyes and ears throughout my cabin, plus complete control over every system. At noon, Audrey arrived with her setup crew, including Garrett, and 3 event planners carrying expensive decorations. "Remember, this needs to look rustic but refined," she instructed. Gesturing around my living room, "These investors expect authenticity with luxury touches." The first subtle trap activated immediately. Floors that recognized Garrett's footsteps began playing random operatic eras at startling volumes whenever he walked across certain boards. "What the hell?" he muttered, stomping on different spots, trying to identify the source. Each step triggered different music, making him look increasingly unhinged as he hopped around my living room. Olivia positioned herself at the coffee shop across the road, providing real-time updates through her phone. Audrey's getting frustrated with the technical difficulties. She texted, "Temperatures rising in the cabin." She's already on her second makeup touch-up. By 4, guests began arriving in luxury vehicles. Robert Westfield, a tall, silver-haired man in his 60s, stepped from a black Bentley, surveying the property like he already owned it. Audrey greeted him warmly, leading him inside with practice charm. "Robert, I'm so pleased you could join us. This location is exactly what we discussed. Perfect centerpiece for the development through Pine's cameras." I watched them tour my home, Audrey presenting each room as though it were already resort property. "We'll expand this deck another 30 feet toward the water." She explained to the investors grandfather clauses and local zoning will allow us to build closer to the shoreline than normally permitted. The second wave of traps began as the party reached full swing. Subtle temperature increases made the well-dressed guests increasingly uncomfortable. Bathroom mirrors displayed the word liar in condensation whenever Audrey entered, and the smart speakers occasionally played short bursts of construction noise whenever Westfield mentioned development opportunities. By 6:30, Audrey was visibly flustered, but maintaining her composure, she escorted Westfield and 3 primary investors into my grandfather's study, now my home office, for a private discussion. The moment they closed the door, I activated Payne's master protocol. "Let's get to specifics," Westfield said. Accepting a glass of expensive bourbon from Audrey timeline for clearing the current owner already handled. Audrey assured him we're using HOA regulations to establish precedent for community use once we document several official events. Here we can expand the requirements until maintaining private ownership becomes untenable. He'll have to sell as they continued discussing my property's future, without me. Pine began its work first. It played back Audrey's own recorded statements through the House speaker system after I become mayor. We can change the zoning without public hearings. Residents don't need to know until it's done then that cabin I altered the HOA bylaws last year to seize it. The new owner doesn't suspect a thing. Guests in the main room froze cocktails mid-sip as Audrey's voice continued, broadcasting her own damning statements in the study. Audrey lunged for her phone, panic evident in her wide eyes. Someone's recording us, then came the twist that shocked even me. Westfield's voice crystal clear over the speakers. The resort is just a cover. We'll harvest the old growth timber. First make $50 million, then build the resort if we still want to. The real money's in the lumber. Mia's conservation project hadn't just been about protecting wetlands. It had identified the valuable timber that Westfield and Audrey planned to extract before any construction. This wasn't just about a resort. It was about exploiting natural resources while pretending to build community amenities. In her desperation to silence the recordings, Audrey attempted to access my home automation system, frantically trying passwords on my desktop computer. Her final attempt triggered Pine's ultimate defense. The emergency sprinkler system water rained down throughout the cabin, drenching the elegant party guests who scrambled toward exits in their ruined designer clothes. Westfield confronted Audrey in the center of the chaos, his voice rising above the commotion. You promised discretion. This partnership is terminated. He stormed out, followed by the investors, leaving Audrey standing alone in my flooded living room. The television screen flickered to life with a simple message enjoying the party. Audrey, has anyone ever asked permission before entering someone else's home? I didn't need to call the police. I let my cabin speak for itself, exposing every scheme and lie with their own words from my monitoring station at Mia's cottage. I watched Audrey's carefully constructed world collapse in real time. Her makeup streaked down her face, her perfect hair plastered to her head, standing amid scattered glasses and soaked paperwork that detailed plans for my property. Plans now thoroughly derailed by nothing more complex than truth. Amplified through technology, the chaos at my cabin rapidly escalated beyond anything I had anticipated as guests fled to their vehicles. Pine detected Garrett attempting to access the main control panel behind my bookshelf. I immediately triggered secondary defenses, causing every screen in the house to display scrolling text of emails between Audrey and various officials detailing kickbacks, permit manipulations, and targeted harassment of homeowners. The documents appeared faster than anyone could remove them, creating a digital paper trail visible to everyone still inside. Several community members who had attended the party as guests, including the current town council president and the head of the local business association, stood shocked in my living room, reading email after email that implicated people they had trusted. One woman pulled out her phone and began taking videos of the screens, documenting evidence of corruption involving officials she had voted for Wesley, who had positioned himself strategically near the front door. Throughout the event, now stepped forward to address the confused and angry guests. Everything you're seeing is real, he announced, his voice steady for the first time since I'd met him. I've been complicit by remaining silent, but this ends tonight. Meanwhile, Mia had contacted local news stations. She'd prepared a press packet about the environmental implications of the planned development, complete with water quality reports, showing how previous Westfield projects had contaminated groundwater in neighboring communities. As reporters arrived at the chaotic scene, they found a wealth of sources willing to speak on camera about what they just witnessed. Most satisfying was watching Audrey's carefully crafted public persona disintegrate. The composed, community-minded leader was now shouting at former allies, threatening lawsuits against anyone filming, and desperately trying to confiscate phones. Every reaction simply confirmed to onlookers that the evidence they were seeing was legitimate through it all. Pine continued executing its programming, flawlessly prioritizing documentation over disruption. The system captured every reaction, every admission, every attempt to destroy evidence. When Garrett tried cutting power to the cabin, the backup generators kicked in seamlessly when Audrey attempted to explain away the recordings. As manipulated, Pine played back additional clips that provided damning context. By 8 a.m., 3 hours earlier than planned, the party had completely collapsed. Westfield's luxury Bentley was long gone. Most guests had fled, and only a core group of community members remained huddled on my deck, discussing what they'd witnessed through it all. I watched remotely, occasionally sending new instructions to Pine. As the situation evolved, the most unexpected development came when the county commissioner, who had attended as one of Audrey's guests, called the sheriff's department himself. "I need to report what appears to be widespread corruption and fraud," I heard him say through Pine's microphones, "and I need to go on record that I had no knowledge of these activities." Self-preservation had kicked in, with former allies now racing to distance themselves from Audrey's sinking ship. As the evening ended, I remotely activated my cabin's exterior lighting, illuminating the property. As several patrol cars pulled up, officers began taking statements from remaining guests while Audrey sat alone on my sofa, repeatedly checking her phone for a call from Westfield that would never come. Her carefully orchestrated power play had not only failed, but had exposed years of manipulation to the very community she had hoped to control. I sent one final message to the television screen before the authorities began their formal investigation. Property rights matter. Community matters. Truth matters. Then I instructed Pine to cooperate fully with law enforcement, providing access to all legally obtained recordings. The technology that had protected my home would now serve justice for the entire community. The HOA party disaster spread through the community faster than Audrey could control. Videos from shocked guests showed them fleeing the sprinklers, while Audrey's voice continued broadcasting her development schemes throughout the neighborhood. By Sunday morning, my phone was overflowing with messages from neighbors who'd never spoken to me before, all expressing versions of the same sentiment. We had no idea what she was doing. Audrey attempted damage control, threatening to sue me for illegal recording. Howard calmly pointed out at an emergency community meeting that Michigan is a 1P party consent state for recording, and since it was my property, I had every legal right to monitor activities within it. Furthermore, he added, addressing the PAC Community Center, "Recordings made during the commission of a crime, such as unauthorized use of property obtained through fraudulent means, are admissible evidence." Using the same bylaw Audrey had weaponized against others' residents, forced an emergency HOA meeting where she had no choice but to attend. Wesley publicly released emails and documents detailing the timber harvesting plan and how Audrey had methodically altered HOA regulations to enable her schemes. "I've been complicit through my silence," he admitted to the stunned community. "I'm trying to make that right today." The most powerful moment came when residents began standing one by one to share their experiences with Audrey's intimidation. Mrs. Peterson, a 78-year-old widow, described how Audrey had threatened to withhold community transportation services unless she voted for certain HOA measures. A young couple explained how their home business license was mysteriously denied until they agreed to sell a small lakefront parcel to one of Audrey's associates. Garrett, looking considerably less intimidating without Audrey's authority behind him, confessed to placing surveillance devices in multiple homes under her direction. "It wasn't just Grant's cabin," he admitted. "We monitored anyone she considered opposition. I presented evidence of the illegal key duplication and how Audrey had presented my cabin as HOA property to investors. This wasn't about a community fundraiser. I explained this was about creating the appearance that my property was already under HOA control to secure investment for a development that would destroy our lake. A secret ballot vote was held with Howard overseeing the process to ensure fairness. The results were overwhelming. Audrey was removed as HOA president with 92% of votes against her as she stormed toward the exit. Howard announced the second vote result. Olivia Reed had been elected as the new HOA president. Olivia took the podium, emotion evident in her voice. "My family once owned the land where Oliver's cabin now stands. We lost it because one person abused power for personal gain. Today we begin rebuilding this community based on transparency and actual community benefit." In the weeks that followed, the transformation was remarkable. Maya received approval for her conservation project, effectively blocking any excessive timber harvesting around the lake. Wesley filed for divorce and provided evidence to the state attorney general regarding potential ethics violations in Audrey's real estate dealings. The mayoral campaign imploded as her financial backers distanced themselves from the scandal. My cabin became a symbol of successful resistance. Neighbors who'd avoided me now stopped by to introduce themselves properly. Howard and I began reviewing the HOA bylaws to remove the problematic clauses Audrey had inserted, and Olivia established a transparency committee to ensure all future changes would be clearly communicated and fairly voted upon. Perhaps the most satisfying outcome was the formation of the Pinterest Homeowner Rights Alliance, a group that met monthly at my cabin to educate residents about their legal rights within HOAs. What began as my personal battle evolved into a community awakening about the importance of civic engagement at even the most local level. As for Audrey, last I heard, she was trying to rebuild her real estate practice in a town 80 miles away. Though the state licensing board was investigating multiple complaints against her, the resort plans were permanently shelved when environmental protection designations championed by Mia were approved for the lakeshore 6 months after the infamous party I was hosting our monthly homeowner rights workshop. When an email arrived from a neighboring community heard about what happened at Pinterest, our HOA. President is pulling similar stunts. Any chance you could share how you fought back when Audrey walked into my cabin that day? I was just trying to protect my home. Now I was helping hundreds protect theirs from software, engineer to HOA trap expert. Life takes unexpected turns. It seems local tyrants haven't learned their lesson. Never mess with the cabin of an AI engineer with too much free time and a personal vendetta. The battle for Pinterest Lake taught me something important. Sometimes the most powerful form of resistance isn't fighting the system from the outside, but making the system itself reveal its own corruption from within. Technology was my weapon, but truth was my ammunition. The ripple effects of our stand against corruption continued to spread throughout the region. 3 months after Audrey's removal, the county prosecutor opened a formal investigation into the relationship between Westfield Development and several local officials. Search warrants executed at their offices revealed a pattern of influence, peddling extending back nearly 15 years, affecting communities across 3 counties. Most gratifying was watching Mia's conservation work finally receive the recognition it deserved. With Audrey's interference, eliminated her research documenting the ecological importance of our lake system was published in a prestigious environmental journal. State authorities used her findings to designate the entire northern shoreline as a protected watershed, permanently blocking any large-scale development. Howard, who had lived at the lake longer than anyone, told me he'd never seen such community engagement. People used to skip HOA meetings, he explained during one of our fishing trips. Now we have to move them to the community center because too many folks show up. When I suggested that would have happened, eventually he shook his head. Sometimes people need to see that standing up actually works. You showed them that the cabin itself continued to evolve. I maintained the security systems, but repurposed much of the technology toward environmental monitoring. Pine now helped me track water quality, wildlife movements, and ecosystem health, becoming a valuable research tool. Rather than just a defensive weapon, my grandfather would have approved of this transition from military applications to community benefit. Wesley, free from Audrey's influence, discovered a talent for community organization. He established a legal defense fund for homeowners facing HOA overreach. Using his insider knowledge of how these systems could be manipulated, I spent years watching how power corrupts. He told me now I can help others recognize the warning signs before it's too late. Livia's leadership transformed the HOA from an instrument of control into a genuine community resource under her guidance. The association focused on actual community benefits, maintaining shared spaces, organizing voluntary events, and facilitating neighbor-to-neighbor assistance. Assessments were reduced by 30% once the inflated administrative expenses Audrey had built in were eliminated. As for me, I found healing in this unexpected community. The isolation I'd sought after my divorce gradually gave way to connection. The cabin remained my sanctuary, but no longer a fortress against the world. Instead, it became a gathering place, a symbol of what ordinary people could accomplish. When they refused to be intimidated one evening, sitting on my deck watching the sunset with several neighbors who had become friends, I realized something profound. Audrey had actually given me an unexpected gift in fighting to protect my property. I'd found something I thought I'd lost in my divorce, a sense of belonging, of community, of home, that extended beyond just walls and a roof. The final piece of closure came in an unexpected form. A year after the infamous party, I received notice that my cabin had been selected for the Pinehurst Historical Register, a newly created designation protecting structures of community significance from future development or alteration. The certificate signed by the town council cited both my grandfather's original craftsmanship and the cabin's role in preserving community integrity against exploitation. When people ask what happened at Pinehurst Lake, I tell them it wasn't really about HOA regulations or property rights. It was about remembering that communities are built on trust, transparency, and genuine concern for collective well-being. When those values are compromised, even the most elaborate schemes eventually collapse under the weight of their own corruption. I keep my grandfather's photo prominently displayed on my desk, his gentle reminder that some things are worth fighting for. His cabin still stands proudly on the eastern shore, its systems now monitoring the health of the lake rather than defending against intruders. And on clear evenings, neighbors often gather on my expanded deck, properly permitted and constructed, of course, to watch the sun set over waters that will remain pristine for generations to come. The story of how one cabin with too many technologies defeated a corrupt HOA continues to spread, reminding homeowners everywhere that even the most entrenched power can be challenged when people stand together for what's right. And that might be the most valuable trap I ever set, capturing not just corruption, but hope for communities everywhere. That's the end. Or is it, BD? Stories always has another plot twist hiding behind the next click. Hit subscribe, smash the like, and keep going.